welcome to Bloomberg Quint. My name is Ayush Alavadi, and over the next half hour, we'll help you catch up with everything that you've missed today. Let's start with the headlines. Markets snapped a 6-day losing streak today. ICICI Bank, RIL and HDFC led the gains. The market regulator returns NSE's consent plea, citing ongoing investigations, a move that could further delay its IPO. In other news, Mehul Choksi, named in the 12,700 crore rupee fraud at PNB, has written to the Enforcement Directorate, says he will join the probe once the suspension of his passport is revoked. The Telugu Desam party pulls out of the NDA government. 2 union ministers resign. Canada and Mexico might get some exemptions from the Trump administration when import duty on steel and aluminium is levied this week. Indian equity benchmarks snapped their losing streak, longest losing streak in a month. Both the Nifty and the Sensex ended with gains of close to 1%. Navneet is standing by to tell us what drove the gains in today's session. Navneet?
Well, some breather for the market, some respite after the fall we've seen in the last 6 trading sessions. Finally, today we ended the day in the green. Nifty closed with gains of 88 points and Sensex also closing the day with gains of nearly 300 points. And Bank Nifty, that was the one actually, your heavyweights like ICICI, State Bank of India, they led to the gains that one saw in the last hour of trade when the Nifty recovered. So you had stocks like State Bank of India, ICICI Bank, which were the top gainers on Nifty, whereas there were some other gainers as well from the broader markets. They did underperform, but nevertheless broader markets closed the day in the green. So the BSE mid-cap index was also up in trade. Adani Ports and the heavyweight Reliance Industries, that contributed the most if you see on Nifty in today's session. Remember, Reliance has been under pressure in the past few sessions, but some bounce back seen for Reliance Industries in today's trade. In terms of top losers on Nifty, you had stocks like Sun Pharma as well as Tata Steel, which were trading weak in today's session. In fact, Sun Pharma no respite despite of that 3 observations which were issued by US FDA with regard to Halol plant. Remember, those observations were just procedural in nature. Some of the F&O gainers I'd like to highlight where some amount of open interest buildup was seen on the long side. So you had stocks like Amara Raja Batteries, which has been a laggard in last 1 year, finally picked up momentum today. And DCB Bank, the banking counters bounced back today. So DCB Bank also surging in today's session, 2.5% higher. Retail stock trend closing at day's high. 333 was the level where it closed. And you also had stocks like CESE, which is in the futures and options market. That also saw a bit of long position coming when it comes to the future side of CESE. Sugar stocks, this was the 3rd straight day of losses for the sugar company. So you had Balrampur Chini, Uttam Sugar, you name any sugar company, and that was down in trade. In fact, we did speak to ISMA today, which highlighted that because of higher sugar production, we've also seen the prices cracking in the last fortnight. REC, PFC, the power financing companies have been weak, and today particularly REC saw cuts of nearly 7%, and you had stocks like PFC2 that saw a cut of 3.5%. From the broader markets, there were some other gainers. Bhushan Steel was pretty strong throughout the session, and also you had stocks like Mangalam Drugs which surged nearly 14%. And talking about the participation today, considering today was the day for the Bank Nifty weekly options expiry, we actually recorded the highest ever turnover in the F&O space.
Right, Navneet, thanks so much for that update. Now, a rebalancing of global trade relations may be on the cards if the Trump administration imposes import tariffs. But it's not a real concern for equity markets, according to Citi's Mohammad Apabhai. In Apabhai's view, the bigger concern for emerging markets like India is if the US markets break the levels seen in the beginning of the year. Here's a small portion of that conversation.
The equity market and other asset markets are remarkably calm about the potential impact of this. We've had a look at, for example, the names that would be impacted if there was a trade war or trade tariffs. And what we've found is that certainly those names over the past year since Trump got elected have actually outperformed, and even in this recent correction have outperformed the broader market. So certainly in the equity market at the moment, no real concern of a trade war. It is the case that steel companies and aluminium companies, particularly the Indian ones, have been negatively impacted as a result of the developments we've seen over the past few days. But in terms of the broader market, no real impact yet seen.
Yeah, I saw your note wherein you mentioned that companies like SAIL might get impacted in a meaningful way if this indeed turns out to be true. So then what are the markets really worried about? Because if I've read your previous interactions, I mean, they may be television interactions, but I happen to read them on the site, you believe that yields, globally at least, the US yields, were close to their peak levels earlier. And if that is indeed the case, that's probably a net positive. Despite all of this, the last one and a half months hasn't been positive for markets. At best, volatile. At worst, in a market like India, a substantial downtick from where we were.
Yes. Well, I think India has got some of its own specific problems, relating to the banking sector, which you know about better than I do. Also, this MSCI potential threat to declassify from emerging market status basically is meaning that international investors who are already overweight Indian equities are not really being given a reason to buy more in Indian equities. The same is happening in Japan, where there's now a concern that the market will recorrelate with dollar yen. And even in Korea, where Samsung Electronics will be suspended for a few months, really foreign investors not being given a huge reason to be buying into those markets. I think the other thing that is happening is that volatility is continuing to remain elevated. So we look at this measure called covariance between the equity and the bond markets, and it's still above 8%, and that's more than double what it was a few months ago. And what that means is that it just keeps people on the sidelines. If anything, what we've been seeing in this region is that this bounce that we're seeing in equities has actually been used as an opportunity to sell into, rather than be buying more into that dip. And it's interesting in terms of styles as well. Value and quality are underperforming. Low risk is outperforming. And that normally is not a time when emerging markets really outperform.
Well, it turns out the market regulator has refused to settle with the National Stock Exchange in the co-location probe. The SEBI returned NSE's settlement plea that would have allowed the exchange to go forward with its IPO. Sajid Manga joins us now with the details. Sajid, SEBI has effectively told NSE to wait till its investigation is over, hasn't it?
That's right. If you look at what has happened is that NSE and its executives had filed for a consent application with SEBI last year. What the regulator has now done is that it has returned the consent plea or the application to NSE and the executives, stating that they can look at the consent application in the near future whenever the broker probe is over. Now, remember, the SEBI is undertaking a broker probe currently, which would the aim of the broker probe is to ensure that if it can find the link or nexus between exchange officials or exchange and the brokers, and how the brokers may have made illegal gains through co-location and high frequency trading, which has happened. The regulator as of now does not have enough evidence and or what you call enough proof of that nexus. That's what one of the sources said, and that's the reason why SEBI has returned the consent application. It is likely that the regulator may file or issue another show cause notice with all this evidence before NSE and the executives can file for a consent application at a later date. But what does it mean? It means that NSE's IPO plans, which were supposed to happen in 2018, it seems now have been deferred by some more time. NSE has come out with a statement that it looks to come out with an IPO in FY19, but the timelines are too tight for that, as some of the bankers said.
Right, Sajid, thanks so much for that detailed report. Now, moving on to a Bloomberg Quint exclusive. Mehul Choksi, one of those named in the PNB fraud that came to light mid-February, has written a letter to the ED, or Enforcement Directorate. He says he's willing to join the investigation and cooperate, provided the suspension of his passport is revoked. Charlene D'Souza, a reporter who's accessed that letter, is here now. Charlene, what exactly has Mehul Choksi said to the ED in that letter?
Mehul Choksi, who is named in the rupees 12,700 crore alleged PNB fraud, has written to the Enforcement Directorate that he will join the probe once the suspension of his passport is revoked. Now, Choksi wrote to ED on the 26th of Feb, and he said that he is also communicating with passport authorities to have his passport restored. Bloomberg Quint obtained a copy of this letter, and these were responses that he sent to ED to his summons. Now, Choksi also said that his lawyer will provide additional information on the same as he was traveling abroad. Now, the letter also states that he has been facing various security issues in view of media and newspaper reports. Choksi's reply is very similar to what Nirav Modi also wrote to the Enforcement Directorate. Now, however, according to news reports, he has written a similar letter to CBI. He said he is not in a position to travel due to persisting health issues.
All right, Charlene, thanks so much for that exclusive report in the PNB case pertaining to Mehul Choksi. Now, the Finance Ministry is finalizing terms to merge 3 state-run general insurers. Officials aware of the development have told Bloomberg Quint that the government is ready to hire a consultant. Ridhima Saxena joins us on the phone with that exclusive. Ridhima, which companies are we talking about here?
So after the budget announcement, it was sure that the public sector companies, Oriental Insurance, United India Insurance and National Insurance will be merged and listed subsequently. Things have slowly started moving on ground as draft terms of reference for hiring a consultant firm have already been prepared and sent to the ministry for finalization. And this is what 2 sources aware of the development told Bloomberg Quint. Now, post the approval, the tender would be floated by May after the renewal of insurance policies happens in April for these 3 companies. The final timelines of how the merger process would proceed would only be finalized once the consultancy firm has already been brought on board. Some 20 to 30 senior officials of these 3 insurers will supervise the merger process. To give you a sense of how big the insurance behemoth would be, it will hold a 32% market share, which is twice the size of the largest general insurer, New India Assurance's market share currently. The 3 key terms of reference that have already been included in the draft are employee and personal reorganization, which means that the branches and the number of employees would be rationalized by the consultancy firm. The second is the integration of IT systems. And the third is the consolidation of investments, which stand to the tune of 69,450 crores. This is, of course, apart from the financial structuring, legal compliance, data privacy issues, competition laws, and the other various regulatory approvals that would be required before the merger finally goes through.
All right, that was Ridhima Saxena joining us live, giving us all the exclusive updates from the insurance sector. But moving on, Bandhan Bank, the first Indian microfinance lender to get a banking permit, is all set to head to the primary markets. It's looking to raise 4,473 crore rupees through the IPO. The lender, which is backed by Singapore Sovereign Fund, GICPTE, is offering shares at 370 to 375 rupees a piece, according to terms for the deal obtained by Bloomberg. Bidding for the shares will open on March 15th and close 4 days later. Now, in other news, the government is all set to amend the Electricity Act. The current regulation allows only licensed power distributors to sell electricity, barring private players from setting up EV or electric vehicle charging stations. Bhanvi Arora tells us what this amendment could offer for all of us and the sector in this report.
The government is focusing on creating charging infrastructure and devising a policy framework for the same. The Power Ministry will be coming soon with guidelines to set up charging stations in the country. They will come up with the guidelines in this financial year. Now, this is in line with the government's mission of achieving 100% e-mobility by 2030. CEA, which is Central Electricity Authority, has laid down some technical standards and specifications for setting up a charging station in India. Now, a major decision which the Power Ministry has taken is considering a sale of electricity as a service. Now, according to the Electricity Act 2003, sale of electricity in India can only be done by a DISCOM and no other company. With this decision, it will pay for the private companies to set up charging stations in the country, and they no longer have to get a license for setting up a charging station. The Power Ministry has also decided the tariffs in most of the states to be below ₹6 per unit. They have picked up a few cities and corridors, and they will be populating them with charging stations. Soon, state PSUs like PFC and NTPC are keenly interested to set up charging stations in India, and they are ready with their blueprint.
Meanwhile, the government, it seems, is rethinking its electric vehicle target for the year 2030. In a written reply to a question in the Lok Sabha, Babul Supriyo, Minister of State for Heavy Industries and Public Enterprises, said that at present there are no plans under consideration to make all vehicles electric in India. His reply was, of course, to a question asking him to outline the government's strategy. Now, moving on to another story, India's sugar mills may be entering a fresh down cycle as the government's subsidy policy has led to a glut at a time when prices are down due to a global oversupply. Chairman of Sakti Sugars, Manikam, says that domestic output is about to rise to a record on the back of a poor minimum support price policy. Speaking to Bloomberg Quint, he said that increasing MSP is not a one-stop solution for the farmers' woes, but instead will only lead to oversupply and tepid demand.
So we have a surplus, and I don't think the world market is in a position to absorb the sugar because world market prices are also lower. So we would see a lot of pressure. I mean, most of this is due to very high cane prices being announced by the Uttar Pradesh government of 32.50 versus 25.50 of the central government. And similarly, Maharashtra also paying high cane prices. So we are sending signals to the farmers that we have a capacity to pay very high cane prices. And consequent to that, the farmers are producing a lot of cane. So clearly, the writing is on the wall. We have to reduce the cane prices to reduce the acreage. Otherwise, this problem will not be solved.
Well, our top national story has something to do with the agricultural sector as well. More than 10,000 farmers are slowly making their way from Nashik to Mumbai on foot in protest against unfair treatment by the central government. The march, led by the All India Kisan Sabha, will end at the Maharashtra Assembly in Mumbai. The protesters are demanding a complete loan waiver for all farmers in the state. Now, the TDP-BJP fallout played out in full glare today after two TDP ministers decided to quit. In response to that, two BJP ministers resigned from Naidu's cabinet. Health Minister Kamineni Srinivas and Endowments Minister Manikyala Rao thanked TDP for introducing them into the state cabinet. In turn, Naidu also appreciated their good work. Earlier this morning, TDP's ministers in the Union Cabinet, Ashok Gajapati Raju and Y.S. Chaudhary, stepped down from their posts. Chaudhary said that the fallout is an unhappy divorce forced by unavoidable circumstances. Chaudhary also said that though they resigned from their ministerial positions, the TDP will continue as a part of the NDA.
Our asking an appointment is not for discussion of this problem. It is to hand over our resignation and thank him for allowing us to work on his team.
उनकी जेन्युइन डिमांड थी। जब हम सत्ता में थे, हमने कहा था स्पेशल स्टेटस देंगे, और उस वक्त भारतीय जनता पार्टी उनको अपने साथ लेने के लिए इतने वादे कर दी, और एक वादा भी बीजेपी की सरकार ने उनके साथ पूरा नहीं किया। मुझे समझ में नहीं आती कि टीडीपी 4 साल से वहाँ क्या कर रही थी।
In an unfortunate turn of events, the statue of Mahatma Gandhi is the latest to be vandalized amidst the rising incidents of vandalism across the country. A bust of Gandhi was found damaged in Kerala's Kannur district earlier today. CCTV visuals showed a suspect behind the incident walking away from the site. According to local reports, the man threw a stone at the statue before fleeing the spot. A police probe has been launched to identify the miscreant. A sigh of relief for Kerala-based Hadia. The Supreme Court today set aside the Kerala High Court order annulling her marriage to a Muslim man. However, the court said that the National Investigation Agency may continue its investigations on the case. Hadia's husband had challenged the Kerala High Court order, which termed the marriage an instance of love jihad. Hadia had also pleaded that she should be allowed to live with her husband. Okay, Bitcoin news now. Bitcoin prices took a beating after the US Securities and Exchange Commission announced last night that digital asset exchanges need to register with the federal agency. Bitcoin prices, as you can see on your screen, fell by over $1,000 in the next hour as a consequence. Today, Bitcoin is clawing back its losses but is still hovering around $10,000. 3 days after making the announcement, the US now says it may just grant some exemptions to its neighbors, Mexico and, of course, China as well. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin tells Bloomberg's Kevin Cirilli that the president doesn't want to start a trade war. All he wants is just a free and fair trading platform. Here's a small slice of that conversation.
The president has already made clear that it relates to Mexico and Canada, that to the extent we have a new NAFTA agreement with them, that they will be exempted from the steel and aluminum tariffs. So I'm not going to comment on other countries. It would be premature. But obviously, Canada, we have a very close relationship in terms of steel going back and forth, and that's something that we're focused on.
With regards to timing of this announcement, is it logical to think that we could get an announcement this week?
That is the plan, yes.
So as early as tomorrow?
It could be as early as tomorrow. It could be Friday. We're working to get the finishing documents on this.
When you look at the response from folks around the world, and let's start there, from China as well as the European Union, who have criticized this, who have said that they would file complaints, some have already filed complaints. What's your response to those criticisms from those particular countries?
So first I would say, let's just put this in perspective. So the president has been very clear. This has been since the campaign. This has been since his presidency on what his economic agenda is. And we've talked about constantly, it is a three-tiered. It's tax reform, regulatory relief, and trade. So we got tax reform done. I think a lot of people question whether we got that done. It took 30 years since the last time. We've already seen the economic benefits of tax reform. We've done a lot of work in terms of regulatory relief. We're looking forward to hopefully the new Dodd-Frank bill passing on a bipartisan basis. I think that's a big step in the right direction for community banks, regional banks being able to grow. And we've been talking about trade for the last year. So since my first G20 finance ministers meeting, we've been talking about trade. So everything we're doing here has been in discussion.
What about then when House Speaker Paul Ryan says, like he did the other day, that he's advocating for a more quote-unquote surgical approach with regards to these trade policies? Is he going to be satisfied this week when this announcement is complete? Is this going to be a more surgical approach like the Republicans on Capitol Hill have advocated for?
Well, again, I think it's somewhere in between. So, and I think, look, the president wants to take on the trade issue. It's a very important economic issue. As you know, China's market is not open to our companies and our workers the way our markets are open for them. The president believes in free and fair trade, but he wants reciprocal trade and reciprocal fair deals. And that's why when we go forward with the 232, there is a mechanism that will be able to deal with these issues.
Bottom line, this week, when there's a new trade tariff policy announced, what is the reaction going to be from the markets, number one, but Republicans? Is there going to be satisfaction, or is it going to be a lot of criticism, like, quite frankly, we've seen all week?
Well, I'm not going to comment on where the markets are in the short term. As you know, there's a lot of volatility. There's no question the market is still up a ton since the election, which is reflective of the president's economic agenda. And I think America is a great place to invest. So over the long term, I still think there's tremendous upside in the market.
Well, with that, it's a wrap on this show. But stay tuned to Bloomberg Quinn for prime time and a lot more programming. Thanks for watching.
9 to 5.